Think you've played all the best RPGs on the PlayStation 2? Think again. While everyone's busy talking about Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts, there's a whole world of underrated gems just waiting to blow your mind. These aren't just hidden, they're criminally overlooked. And by the end of this video, you'll be wondering how you missed them.
Welcome, warrior of Gondor. Your road here.
The PlayStation 2 had some seriously underrated RPGs, and one that often slips under the radar is Lord of the Rings: The Third Age. This game does something really bold. It doesn't just rehash the movies or books. Instead, it throws you into the same world, during the same war, but through the eyes of completely new characters. So you're not following Frodo or Aragorn, you're carving your own path through Middle-earth. What's cool is how the game blends the epic fantasy setting with gameplay that feels straight out of Final Fantasy X. We're talking full turn-based combat, a visible turn order system, and a big focus on strategy. Every character you get has their own strengths, and if you don't think carefully about buffs, elemental weaknesses, or when to heal, you're gonna get wrecked. It's not a button masher, this one rewards thinking. And let's talk visuals. For a PlayStation 2 game, this thing looked amazing. The environments were packed with detail, character models had a ton of personality, and they even used real scenes from the movies during cutscenes. That added a layer of immersion that really hit different back then. Even though it launched on Xbox, GameCube, and PC, the PS2 version is the one most people remember. It's one of those games that quietly delivered a solid experience and deserved way more love. If you're into strategic RPGs and want a new angle on the world of Tolkien, this one's definitely worth your time. If you've never heard of Magna Carta Tears of the Blood, don't worry, you're not alone. This PS2 RPG flew way under the radar, but for those who gave it a shot, it delivered something totally different. Created by a South Korean team called Softmax and brought west by Atlas. This game mixes beautiful art, tactical battles, and a story that starts simple but gets surprisingly deep. The first thing that hits you is the visual style. It doesn't look like your typical anime game. The character designs are straight-up works of art, thanks to Korean artist Hyung-tae Kim. It feels like every scene is pulled from a graphic novel, but the real twist is in how it plays. Instead of your usual turn-based formula, the combat relies on a unique key system where you manage energy and time attacks perfectly. It demands strategy, not just button mashing. You play as Callants, a guy driven by revenge after losing everything. Sounds cliché, right? But as the story unfolds, it gets layered with politics, betrayal, and choices that actually matter. It's not just about payback. It's about uncovering a bigger truth in a world that's constantly shifting. Years later, the sequel hit the Xbox 360, but the original still holds up. Out of all the RPGs in the Tales of series, Tales of Legendia might just be the weirdest, and that's exactly why it's so memorable. This game doesn't play by the usual rules. Instead of the flashy, fast-paced combat most fans are used to, Legendia throws in a system that feels more like a classic 2D fighter. And there's a reason for that. The dev team had folks who worked on fighting games like Soul Calibur. And the result is a battle system that's clunky to some, refreshing to others, but definitely unlike anything else in the franchise. Most people only talk about Tales of the Abyss when it comes to the PlayStation 2 era, but Legendia was trying just as hard to stand out. It just got buried under the massive wave of RPGs that dropped during that time. But here's the thing, what really makes Legendia shine isn't the combat, it's the story. Specifically, how much it focuses on the characters. This isn't one of those games where only the main protagonist gets attention. Everyone in your party has their moment, their arc, their emotional baggage, and the game actually gives them space to grow. And let's talk about the soundtrack. It's on another level. Go Shiina composed the music, and he went wild with it. You get epic orchestral tracks, soft emotional pieces, even some weird experimental stuff that somehow works. It gives the whole game a vibe that feels different from anything else in the series. Sure, it's not perfect, but it didn't get the love it deserved back then. And even now, it's kind of forgotten. But if you're into RPGs that take risks, tell meaningful stories, and do something a little different, Tales of Legendia is worth checking out. Most people who've played the Grandia series probably skipped right over Grandia Xtreme. And honestly, it's easy to see why. It doesn't have the emotional story beats or deep character arcs the earlier games were known for. But here's the thing, it's actually one of the most mechanically satisfying RPGs on the PlayStation 2. Instead of focusing on long cutscenes and story-heavy pacing, Grandia Xtreme goes all in on combat and exploration. This game is a dungeon crawler at heart, packed with smart enemy design, clever map layouts, and a battle system that's just tight. And that signature Grandia combat? Still here and still awesome. It rewards timing, positioning, and knowing your team inside out. The difficulty curve keeps you on your toes, and the customization system lets you build your squad exactly how you want. It's grindy, yeah, but in the best way. That just one more fight kind of grind. If you love turn-based combat with actual depth and strategy, this one's seriously underrated. Radiata Stories is one of those games that flew under the radar, but honestly, it shouldn't have. It had the charm, the creativity, and some seriously cool mechanics that made it stand out from the crowded PS2 RPG scene. What made it special wasn't just the story or the combat, it was how alive the whole world felt. You could recruit tons of characters, and I'm not talking about just a handful. We're talking over 150 NPCs, each doing their own thing, following daily routines, and having their own personalities. It was like being dropped into a living town where every person mattered. The main story follows Jack Russell, a loudmouth rookie who ends up caught in a massive war. It starts off light and funny, but things get real fast. The game isn't afraid to hit you with emotional punches when you least expect it. And the best part? Your choices actually change how the story plays out. There's even a moment where you have to pick sides, and whichever path you choose, the whole second half of the game changes. Now let's talk combat. It's real-time, action-packed, and way more strategic than it looks. You control Jack directly, but you can also give commands to your squad. Positioning, timing, and knowing your team's strengths is super important. Even after you beat the main story, the game throws a ton of extra content at you. Side quests, hidden characters, multiple endings, it gives you reasons to come back. If any PS2 RPG deserves a second shot with a remaster or remake, it's this one.
Ha! Ha!
So, you're saying this dump is supposed to be Nirvana?
Most RPG fans know Atlas for hits like Persona 3 and Persona 4, but there's one title that flew way under the radar, and honestly, it deserves way more love. Digital Devil's Saga is one of the boldest and most unique RPG experiences the PlayStation 2 ever saw. It takes place in a post-apocalyptic wasteland called the Junkyard, where survival comes with a terrifying twist. To grow stronger, your characters have to literally devour their enemies. Yeah, you heard that right. Cannibalism is a core mechanic, and it actually works brilliantly within the game's world and systems. What makes this game so different isn't just the dark story or the gritty setting, but how it blends turn-based combat with strategy and morality. Every battle feels like a puzzle, especially with the hunger system pushing you to think ahead and manage resources carefully. And the music is absolutely haunting. It pulls you deep into that bleak, brutal atmosphere and doesn't let go. Digital Devil's Saga isn't just one game, though. It's a two-part story, and the sequel picks up right where the first leaves off. Together, they tell a deep, emotional, and sometimes disturbing tale about identity, fate, and what it means to be human, even when you're turning into a monster. Sadly, the game never got a proper remaster. The only way to play it now is through old physical copies or a digital version on the PlayStation 3. If you're into action RPGs and somehow missed Champions of Norrath, you're in for a treat. This game flew under the radar for a lot of people, but it delivered one of the most fun dungeon-crawling experiences on the PS2. Set in the EverQuest universe, it brought all the fantasy vibes without the need to dive into the MMO world. You didn't need an internet connection to enjoy it. Though it had co-op features, most folks played it solo, and honestly, it was still a blast. What made it shine was how it nailed that sweet spot between simple and deep. You could pick it up and start swinging swords in minutes, but the more you played, the more layers you'd uncover. There were different classes, each with their own flavor, tons of loot to chase, and the kind of satisfying combat that just felt good. That's because it used the same engine as Dark Alliance, so every hit had weight, and every dungeon felt like a real adventure. This wasn't just button mashing for the sake of it. You had to think, plan your build, work with your team if you had one, and constantly upgrade your gear. Champions of Norrath had that addictive loop that kept you coming back, always wondering what better weapon or armor you'd find next.
Are you okay?
Steambot Chronicles is one of those games that dared to do something different, and honestly, it nailed it. While everyone else was stuck in epic wars or saving the world for the 100th time, this game said, what if we just gave you a world to live in? No memory, no clear direction, just freedom. You wake up as a guy with amnesia and end up in a world where steam-powered mechs, called trotmobiles, run the show. Sounds wild? It is, and that's the best part. You're not locked into one path. Want to be a hero? Go for it. A rebel? That's on the table. Or maybe you'd rather join a band and tour the country playing music. Yeah, you can do that too. It's less about grinding levels and more about living in a world that actually reacts to what you do. You can fight in arenas, trade with merchants, or just explore cities full of life and weird, interesting characters. The mech system is super customizable, letting you tweak your ride with new weapons, parts, and gear depending on how you want to play. But what really hits home is how personal it all feels. The writing is sharp, funny, and full of heart. This isn't some throwaway side project. It's a game that genuinely wants you to get lost in its world. And once you do, you'll wonder why more RPGs didn't take this kind of risk. If you're a Fullmetal Alchemist fan and never played Curse of the Crimson Elixir, you're seriously missing out. This action RPG on the PlayStation 2 dives straight into a brand new story with Edward and Alphonse, and somehow nails the vibe of the anime without just rehashing the same plot. It's not just another lazy adaptation, they actually put effort into making it feel like a real part of the universe. The combat hits that sweet spot between quick action and smart strategy. You've got real-time fights mixed with alchemy-based powers, so you're not just button mashing, you're actually thinking during battles. It's not super complex, but it keeps you on your toes, and that's what makes it fun. The story is original, but it still brings in fan-favorite characters and familiar themes like sacrifice, redemption, and chasing the truth, everything that makes Fullmetal Alchemist special. And yeah, the visuals are dated by today's standards, and some of the fights can feel a little samey, but the heart of the game is solid. It's crazy how overlooked this one is. Out of the Fullmetal Alchemist games on the PS2, this one easily stands out as the most complete experience. Most RPG fans think they know what to expect from a Suikoden game. Tons of characters, deep political plots, and that classic turn-based combat. But Suikoden IV flips the script. Set way before the first game, it throws you into the middle of a deadly war at sea, with a protagonist who's not just fighting enemies, but also dealing with a cursed power that slowly eats away at him. That rune of punishment? Yeah, it gives you insane strength. But it comes with a price. Instead of traveling across kingdoms like in the older games, you're out on the open ocean, captaining your own ship, recruiting over 100 allies, and jumping into massive naval battles. It's a bold shift from what the series was known for, and not everyone was ready for it. But that change gives the game a vibe that's completely its own. Isolated, moody, and sometimes even a little haunting. The combat stays turn-based, but it's smoother, faster, and more focused. You won't find the same level of world-building as in previous entries, but what you do get is a story that hits hard, full of choices, regret, and the weight of power. Suikoden IV isn't the most polished game on the PS2, and sure, it got overshadowed at launch, but it's one of those titles that sticks with you long after the credits roll. So, now I gotta ask, how many of these RPGs did you actually know about? Or better yet, which one are you adding to your must-play list? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what hidden gems you've got. And hey, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps a ton and keeps content like this coming your way. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll catch you in the next one.